Welcome to ClueCon Weekly. Join us every Wednesday to learn about the latest cutting-edge developments in the real-time communications industry. ClueCon Weekly is brought to you by FreeSWITCH Solutions. Get support and professional services directly from the creators of the FreeSWITCH open source project, solving your issues in the most efficient, stable, and scalable way possible. Get the FreeSWITCH advantage. Visit freeswitch.com. Also brought to you by ClueCon, the premier technology conference for developers by developers. Join us every summer in Chicago. ClueCon kicks off on Monday with our annual hackathon, The Coder Games, followed by 3 days of technology-rich presentations discussing telecom, WebRTC, and IoT from developers around the world. To learn more, visit ClueCon.com or call 877-74-CLUE.
And welcome to ClueCon Weekly. Today is the 21st of November. Everybody in the States is getting ready for their Thanksgiving holiday. But this week we're going to be joined all the way from Uganda by Fred from the FreeSWITCH SignalWire team. He's going to be talking about FreeSWITCH, WebRTC, Virtual Communicator, and a whole bunch of other fun stuff. So stand by for that. Before we go there, let's go over and talk to Abby Minasali for the news. Abby, how are you doing?
I am doing great. Thank you for asking. Hello, and thank you for joining us today on ClueCon Weekly. And happy Thanksgiving, everybody! Tomorrow, but close enough. Also, if you haven't heard, we are now on Slack. You can always contact us through our traditional methods that you're used to, but if you are interested in joining the FreeSWITCH community Slack channel, you can find that link on our Facebook page and our website and in our newsletter. So as always, if you have any questions at all during this call, during Community Corner, or during Blogspot, or for Fred, please comment them in the YouTube, HipChat, IRC, or those new Slack channels, and we will try to answer them live during this call. We are also so appreciative of the FreeSWITCH community and all the support you give us. So as a special gift, SignalWire is offering $50 in credit for new registrations. You can sign up. I'll provide a link in the chat box. You can sign up at that link using the code FreeSWITCH31337, which I'll also put in the chat box, which is going to be good for 30 days starting today. In that same vein, it is never too early to start thinking about ClueCon, and this year is going to be our 15th anniversary, and we are so thankful for everybody. So this is going to be a really special year celebrating all the support we've gotten in the last 15 years. We're back at the Swiss Hotel again, August 5th through 8th, our usual dates, August 5th through 8th. So mark your calendars and save the date for that. And a special shout out, thank you to Jersey Mike and VoiceTel for sponsoring the boat tour on our Thursday of ClueCon. It's our third year in a row doing it. It's always really popular. So if you are interested in going to ClueCon, I would make sure you stay until at least Thursday because that is always a lot of fun to see the city and to see the sunset over the lake. All right, thank you guys, and back to you, Ken.
All right, thank you very much, Miss Abby. Oh, if that would work, I hit the right button. How about that? So thanks, Abby. Yeah, for you guys that have never been to ClueCon before, register early. And I like to tell everybody, come in on Sunday, be there for Monday, be there all day, all the way through Friday, and then make Friday your travel day. You miss too much stuff. And I know Abby has been. I don't think you've missed any of them, have you, Abby?
Oh. Yeah, I haven't been there all 15, but I've been there a lot.
I know, right? So, but you come in and then book your reservation for that. We'll have more information on reservations and that kind of stuff coming up before long. So you guys watch out for that. Now we're going to go over and talk to Mr. Mike Mavrutis. Mike, how you doing today? I think you got some community corner stuff for us.
Yes, we do. And so we have a question for Mr. Jarris. Mr. Jarris, why should we not? Why should we disable transcoding?
So I don't generally like to disable transcoding the actual variable because every once in a while you need to transcode. In this day and age, for the most part, devices support a lot of codecs, and you rarely ever need it. There are still occasions. Why do we not want to transcode? We don't want to transcode because transcoding is expensive and costs lots of CPU and degrades quality and all of those things. So it's always better to avoid transcoding. So the best way to do that is to use a feature we call late negotiation. In late negotiation, basically, we don't negotiate the codecs up ahead of time when you're calling from A to B. We take the codecs in the A leg, maybe take some out of there, but send them over to the B leg, and then wait for the B leg to respond and say what codecs they support. You can also add additional codecs in the middle, but in general, it's better to start with the codecs that the A leg has. Only add ones that you know you might need to add at the end of the list for compatibility with the device that doesn't support what the A leg codecs support, and then let the B leg pick the codecs. So that's called late negotiation. And then there's a variable media mix codec something that lets you add our additional codecs, and you can also use absolute codec string to force stuff. And then that gets the codecs over to the B leg, and then to get the B leg codec that it chooses back to the A leg, we use a variable called inherit codec. That forces it back the other way. That will 99.9% of the time in almost every scenario get you without transcoding. The other thing is people try to use proxy media mode to avoid transcoding. Proxy media mode causes all kinds of weird issues. Oh, that was interesting. Causes all kinds of weird issues where certain things aren't supported in it. There's no reason to ever use proxy media mode in any way, shape, or form. It is there for legacy reasons only. For when we were trying to support fax and video before we really had support for it. There is zero reason to ever use proxy media mode, so don't use it. It is not less expensive than just setting up a regular call without transcoding.
Is there ever really any legitimate reason, like say maybe a codec that we don't support, that somebody might want to use it?
I haven't seen a case in years that was a legitimate reason.
Yeah. So just don't.
Yep.
Is what you're saying. Yeah. Will you be removing that from the code base anytime in the future? Or
remove it, but I will take every opportunity to convince people not to use it. Don't use it.
Don't use it.
There's really, like, I haven't seen a legitimate case of it in 3 or 4 years. And the only legitimate case is if you're trying to pass a codec that we don't support. And a better solution to that is to create a stub codec, a stub pass-through codec like we have in mod G729, the pass-through version.
Yeah. Cool. So you heard it from Mike, guys. Don't use what? That's right. Don't use proxy media mode.
Ever.
Ever. You will find it broken.
Yep.
So thank you very much, Michael. Anything else you want to say on that subject?
That's all I got.
All right, guys. Say thanks to Michael. And we're going to go back over to Miss Abby for Blogspot now. Abby, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. All right, well, with Thanksgiving means Christmas is next, and then New Year's, and then it's 2019. So in this new age, 2018 and probably 2019, everything that all the trends are about getting things done faster. There are faster Amazon deliveries, faster updates, and faster internet. But for a company obsessed with being number one, the United States is actually shockingly low on the average of internet speeds by country. So Cable, which is a British data analysis firm, actually ranked 200 different companies based on their average broadband speed, and the US did not even make it into the top 10. So as of July 2018, Singapore has been taking the lead at 60.39 Mbps. Sweden is second with 46, and Denmark is third with 43. And the United States is all the way at the bottom with at 20th. They're the 20th slow or fastest internet in 200 countries, and that's with 25.86. So you can see a full list of the ranking of countries by internet speeds on our blog, which is on our website. It shows the entire ranking. It's pretty interesting. It also shows how each country has moved based on the past years. So if they have always been the same rank or if they've gotten faster or slower, it's a pretty interesting data to look at. But obviously this ranking, the 20th ranking, is not that bad, and it definitely does not mean that we're living in the dark ages or void of any internet. But in a world where a lot of our careers, our friendships, our education, and our commerce relies completely on the internet, it is pretty surprising that we're not doing better. However, the United States does rank number 1 in the cost of internet services. Woohoo! So we're paying the most, but we're only 20th. So what gives? Well, it depends on who you ask. As with any complicated problem, there are multiple factors that go into it, but a lot of it is actually rooted in our economic history. So according to The Communications Crisis in America, which is a book by Susan P. Crawford, major cable providers actually met together, and agreed with each other not to compete with each other for certain territory. And they did that back in 1997, and they dubbed that day the Summer of Love. So ever since that day, internet service providers have generally been geographically segregated with very little overlap, which actually creates something called a natural monopoly or a mini monopoly over these geographical areas. And these cable companies used to be overseen by local governments rather than any state ones. So they used to get away with a lot more shenanigans. So before 1992, many cable companies actually got exclusive contracts from their local governments that let them be the only ones who could set up shop until they could build up their lines and grow out their businesses. But by the time these exclusivity contracts were stopped by the Cable Television Consumer Protection and Competition Act, most of the internet service providers had already created these mini monopolies and had their own territory, so to speak, which created a lack of competition, which is, to put it simply, one of the main reasons our internet is so slow. Less competition economically means that your prices are going to be higher, and there is less pressure for these companies to keep their product up to a golden standard, because you really have no choice of anywhere to go if they don't live up to your expectations. Half of all of Americans actually only have 2 internet providers to choose from, and it is very common for other areas, especially rural areas, to only have 1 ISP to choose from. And so if they're not keeping up with the latest technology, or they're not pushing faster speeds and better customer service, they don't lose any customers because we literally have nowhere else to go. We don't have a choice. So then the big question is, why is there no competition? So part of that is because of the agreement that they made, and part of it is because of those exclusivity contracts they got when they were building up shop. But also, it is really, really difficult for new internet startups to come to fruition. It's really, really difficult. There's a really big barrier to entry. Current laws do force these mini monopolies to share the poles, but they don't have to share the wiring, which means initial costs can actually reach up to a maximum of millions of dollars for upfront for equipment. And these ISPs, especially new ones, don't usually see a profit until about 5 to 10 years later. So for that high of a cost and that profit flow, it's really difficult for new companies to find investors or to get loans. And if they do somehow find the money, a lot of ISPs already have a big firm grasp on the market. So it's really difficult to capture any market share. And if a startup does seem to be threatening, a lot of these big companies will actually take legal action against the newbies with the intention of drowning them in legal fees, or they bribe. They offer their customers really good deals that the new startup simply can't afford. So the main reason that a lot of new companies aren't getting into this business is simply because it's not worth it, and it's really not worth the effort or the money because it's going to be really difficult. They're probably going to fail, and even if they don't, they're not going to see profit for about 10 years. So from the outside, it might look like the industry could be competitive because, there's Comcast, AT&T, Spectrum now, but each of these providers has their own territory. So in those territories, they're practically free from any competition. Another reason our internet is so slow is the concept of the last mile, which has nothing to do with economics at all. It's all technical. So while we made huge strides in fiber optic lines and other things, a lot of the United States internet still relies on copper wiring. And America and most other countries are simply just too big to replace this infrastructure efficiently or cheaply. So nobody really sees it as worth the time because it's such a large feat to take on. And while we're at a point where the internet is able to travel like impressively, incredibly fast, it faces a bottleneck effect in that last mile, which is just a metaphor for the copper wiring that it has to go through in order to reach your physical house. Because these wires were originally designed for telephones or for cable, not high-speed internet, the connection slows very dramatically when it reaches this wiring. So while Google Fiber is attempting to increase internet speeds and competition throughout America, it might be a very long time until we see any progress. And don't even get me started on Comcast customer service. That's the worst part for me. So that's all I have for today. If you'd like to learn more about that, you can visit our blog on our website. But other than that, I will see you next week. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you very much, Miss Abby. We're going to jump over to Mike. I think he's got a guest for us today. Mike, who do you got for us today?
I have Fred, and Fred's gonna teach us how to do some stuff in RTC with Verto Communicator. Fred, let's go. Let's see it.
Hello. Hi, Mike.
Always good to have you on the show.
Thank you.
So what are you going to be teaching us today? Or actually, I've already said that, but
Today, I'll actually be covering WebRTC in FreeSWITCH, how to configure your FreeSWITCH to do video and audio. And then I'll be showing you how to make some test calls for that. We shall be doing some video calls.
and so this is actually a very common request that people ask about this. So it's good to have this out here in a video format to be able to go back and watch it over and over.
Exactly. I think I wanted to make it really easy for someone to dive into FreeSWITCH and enable video and have the feel of transmitting video on the browser.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
All right, let's get started. Let's see it.
Okay. I will introduce myself again. My name is Fred Muteesa. I work with FreeSWITCH and SignalWire, and I've spent some time working with FreeSWITCH. And today I want to be talking about WebRTC. And just like the word goes, WebRTC is real-time communication on the browser or on the web. And when you hear the word WebRTC, there are a few things we think about. And the first thing that comes to mind when you talk about real-time communication is video, audio, and probably SMS, that is data. What is WebRTC? WebRTC is basically video and audio running in web browsers, and it's a band of standards and technologies that enable peer-to-peer communication and streaming of data. FreeSWITCH is basically a complete WebRTC solution. It enables communication between browsers and pre-existing legacy applications. Since we already know that FreeSWITCH supports both SIP and WebRTC, that means that you can have endpoints that are connected to your browser that can call SIP endpoints directly. So the popular implementation here is that we have a web browser that accesses your hardware, and then it runs an application that has JavaScript. The JavaScript basically has functions that use WebRTC APIs to interact with the local computer and to ask for permissions to use the hardware, that is microphone and camera, and then it does the streaming of the audio. Of course, WebRTC will need some form of signaling and session management. Just in this graphic, we see that if we are to move media across the two browsers, we shall need some form of signaling to move the media across and have these two people communicating. WebRTC is embedded in 3 groups of APIs. We have the get user media, that is basically that helps you get access to the multimedia hardware for you to be able to access the microphone and camera. And then we have the RTC peer connection that helps moving of the audio and video streams between the defined peers. And then we also have the data channels that helps to move arbitrary data between the defined peers. So in summary, a functional WebRTC application will need to have the get user media API to control the microphone and camera. And then we shall need a session protocol that helps to establish a session. And then we have the ICE, that is the scan and turn server, to help find the network path, because we have in the network you find things like NATing, where we have private IPs and public IPs, and WebRTC will need to find a path to the endpoint. So that's where we shall need a scan server. And then we shall have the RTCP peer connection that will help in the streaming. And this graphic will show exactly what I'm trying to explain. For us to have the data streams move across, we have to find the path to the endpoint or the web clients. Now, it is also important to understand that in WebRTC, encryption of media and data streams is mandatory. You can't have WebRTC when the web or the media streams are not encrypted. And the media streams are encrypted as SRTP with key exchange via DTLS. And that is done for you by the RTCP peer connection API. And as I'm going to show you shortly, this will be the WebSocket Secure, which we use when defining WebRTC servers and endpoints. I'll be showing you that shortly. So this graphic here basically shows you that the transport TCP, it's optional to encrypt that, but then for the media which runs on UDP, it's mandatory to encrypt that. And that is encrypted using DTLS. Just give me a sec here to see if I can do some kind of highlight. So this transport TCP is optional for encryption. That's why we have WSSS in FreeSWITCH, and then we also have WS. And then for the data streams, it is mandatory to encrypt that. It's mandatory to encrypt the data streams. That's very important to understand. So I already mentioned FreeSWITCH is a complete WebRTC platform. It can act as both WebRTC gateway and WebRTC application server. So FreeSWITCH has the capability to have communication between the browser and a PSTN, because FreeSWITCH supports both the VATO protocol and the SIP. Now, as I go for the live demo, I've given you the background on the theory. I'm assuming that you've installed your FreeSWITCH, and in my environment, I'm going to have Debian 9, and it's going to be running FreeSWITCH 1.8. And on my slide here, I'm showing you how you can install that really quickly, and you just pull in the key, add the repo, and then you update, and then you install FreeSWITCH. And that will basically give you the vanilla configs for FreeSWITCH. And that's what I'll be using. My server is already installed and configured. Now, the first thing we're going to do is to have certificates, because I talked about encryption, so we need to have certificates for our server, our web server. And you have two options. You can get certificates from let'sencrypt.org for free, and then you can also install a web server. The two options, or the two mostly used web servers, are Apache and Nginx. Nginx is really light. That's why the guide on the FreeSWITCH website shows you how to install Virtual Communicator using Nginx. Apache is widely used. In my demo, I'm going to basically show you.
Fred, is it important to have a valid certificate?
Yes, it's important, because that will help you do. I mean, I'll come back to that shortly while I'm demoing that on the web. So it's really important to have a valid certificate. So your URLs will be trusted on the web.
Mm.
Yeah, I'll show you that shortly. Just give me a sec here. All right, so after you've installed your choice of web server, you will have to generate the certificates and then copy them over to the directory. And you can find the cert directory using this command. I'll be showing you this on the screen shortly. Okay, let's go into the server. Basically, this is my server here. And when I go to the command line, I can actually see the cert directory. Let me remove the logs off the screen. All right, so I can so this tells me that my cert directory is etc FreeSWITCH TLS. And once I know where that is, I can actually go in and see if I have any certificates, or I already know where to put them. Let's get back to this. So let's first of all install Let's Encrypt. And that one, let me jump off the command line and go into etc sources.list. Oops. And then you basically add that repository, the stretch backports. That's what we're going to use to install the Let's Encrypt certbot for Apache. Once that's in, you can actually do updates. And once that's in, you can install So as you can see, I've already installed this. And then the next step after installing that is to go into, after installing the Let's Encrypt certbot, you can highlight here.
So Let's Encrypt is really cool because it's a valid certificate that's completely free, right?
Yeah. So it basically gives you a valid certificate that is completely free. So one step that I did that I won't be able to show on screen here is that I created a domain for my public IP using my DNS server. So I created a domain which will be vato.imil.com, and I'll be showing you that. But I added an area code in the DNS server. But for your case, you can use any domain, and ideally you would create a file here called in etc Apache 2 sites available. You can create a configuration file for your domain. For mine, it will be etc Apache site available. I created my domain as vato.imil.com. So you create a configuration file for your domain, and all you do in there is you create a server name, and the server name will be vato.imil.com. So this step here basically allows us to have, let's encrypt generate certificate. We are going to generate a certificate for this domain. So it allows us access our server using vato.imil.com. And I created an area code so that this domain points to my public IP. When I ping that domain, it actually resolves to my public IP. So once you do that, you just reload Apache, and then you generate a certificate. So we have our server name defined there, and we have our configuration file for our domain. We basically just run the command. We just run this command right here. And then this command will basically generate a certificate for these two domains. If you need www or any other domain, that subdomain, you can do this, but running certbot apache -d-example.com will basically generate the certificate for you. So after that step, we should have our certificates generated. So we need to copy them over to the correct directory of FreeSWITCH with those commands there. So I can go into etc, let's encrypt live, and once I run the command, I have vato.imil.com existing, and it has put all the generated sats here. So these are the files that it has created. Once you have these files, you basically run these commands here. You copy everything in that directory over to etc FreeSWITCH TLS, and then you go in there, and then you append full chain and the private key permissions to WSS. This is the one that we are going to use for the encryption of the data streams in WebRTC. So once we have this copied, we shall need to definitely reload FreeSWITCH to pull those in. You also append the sat.pam and private key to agent.com, and then you also do the authority file. You copy that certificate over there to that file. So when I check my etc FreeSWITCH TLS, I've copied over the certificates, and then I can just show you what I have in WSS. I have the two certificates copied over here, this file. That's what was already there by default. So that step has allowed us to get a certificate from Let's Encrypt, which is free, and then you copy it over to the directory in your FreeSWITCH, the stats directory in your FreeSWITCH. And then the next step will be for us to basically install Apache. You can install Apache with the following commands. The first command is, of course, updating, and then you install Apache, and then you have to replace the certificate paths in your Apache default SSL configuration. The command, this command here basically enables SSL on Apache, and then these two PAL commands right here, they will replace the default path in the Apache default SSL.conf file and put the FreeSWITCH path files, that is sat.pm and privatekey.pm. I can show you that that is already existing. So when I go into etc Apache to site enabled, default. So I can show you these two lines that they are already pointing to my FreeSWITCH certificates. So this is really very important for SL to be enabled and using the certificates that Let's Encrypt generated for you. You have to do this step, and then after doing that, you have to restart Apache, and that is the last command. It's basically for restarting the server. If you are interested in Nginx, I've also put a step that you can use to do the same step on Nginx. Instead of Apache, you can run these commands and they'll run successfully. Now we have to configure Vato. By default, once FreeSWITCH is installed, you have a file in etc FreeSWITCH autoconfigs vato.conf, and there we need to define the IP and port that we shall use to access Vato, and we need to define if we are using the secure mode or the insecure one, and that is the option you have for secure is equal to true. This part right there, it allows you to enable security, and of course you have to define your public IP, which I have here, and then you can also change the debug value to probably 10. If you want to see everything about Vato Communicator on the console, you can increase this debug value right here to something above 0. Let's jump into that file and see what it basically has. So if I go into etc FreeSWITCH auto configs vato.conf, I can see what I have. I have the bind local port, which is 8002, listening on all IPs, and then secure is true. And then I also, another parameter that I'm looking at is the external RTP IP here, and I've set it, instead of setting it to my IP, I've set it to a variable external RTP IP, which is defined in vas.conf. So this variable here, you can actually check it on the command line and just actually jump out and run this command real quick. All right, so this shows me what this variable is resolving to, but if I want to really see where it is configured, it's in vas.xml. That's where I've defined this IP. The external RTP IP is my public IP. And then I have the same parameter for the external SIP IP, which is the same public IP for my box. So after changing those configurations for Vato, you have to reload your FreeSWITCH service, and then we also have to do the configs for SIP on WebRTC because we want our virtual endpoints to call the SIP registered users. So we go into the SIP profiles and basically define a secure port where data streams are going to be originating from to connect to the SIP endpoints. We can jump in there and see what I have. etc FreeSWITCH SIP profiles internal.xml. And since it's FreeSWITCH handling the routing basically, so we just do this setting in the internal profile. We don't really need to do it in the external profile. We just do it in the internal profile. So you can actually see these parameters, which are actually there by default. We have the WSS binding, which is 7443. And then we also have the external SIP IP and RTP IPs, which is still my public IP. Once you have that, you go in and reload FreeSWITCH. So once we have those parameters, we should be able to access our server on the web page. So the steps we've done so far are actually configuring FreeSWITCH to be WebRTC enabled, and then we've also installed our web server, and then we've also installed the certificates. The next thing is we need to write a client for the web browser, and we add the JavaScript so that it's able to connect to FreeSWITCH. We need to connect our browser to FreeSWITCH, and FreeSWITCH comes with a default client that is called Virtual Communicator, and this Virtual Communicator can be found in the FreeSWITCH code or source code, which you can easily pull in using those commands on screen. So let's see here, we can jump into user local source. I'll make a directory called ClueCon weekly. Let's jump in there. I can actually pull in the FreeSWITCH source code right now just to demo for you. That command basically pulls in the FreeSWITCH source code. All right, it's oh, it's done. Thank God. So you can go into the source code, and then when you've just pulled in the source code, that's what you have. But you can go into HTML5 Virtual, and then you have Virtual Communicator. So that comes with FreeSWITCH, and once you have that, you have the code, and we have this script that you can run. Well, don't mind the name, it still has a name Debian 8 install, but the commands in there work on both Debian 9 and Debian 8. And mind you, my server is Debian 9. So let me just show you what commands are in there. So these are a command. It will just basically update the server and install NMP and Node.js legacy, and then it will use NMP to install the other parameters and that are required for the WebRTC in the browser. So once that step is done, once that script is done, you basically link. You can create a soft link in your directory root or in your server. That I'm talking about the last line here. It will basically create a soft link to the virtual communicator, so that when you have this directory VC, which can be VC or VC1 or VC3 or anything else in your directory root, it will come and read the files inside here. Once you run the script debian 8-install.sh, it will create a dist directory where we have the virtual client in there. Switch HTML5. So we have this directory here, which I already had because I had already run this folder before. So when you go into this, you can actually see the files that are compiled by that script where we have the index.html. So all that said, after we have all the files in, we have to go into the config.json file and we set the password. This is very important because we have the password defined in vars.xml for all users. So we have to also set the same password in our config.json. I'll show that quickly here. www.html. Then I'll show you what's in config.json. So that's my password 12345. And then when I also check etc FreeSWITCH vars.xml, I have the same password 12345. That will allow the browser to basically connect to FreeSWITCH. I can now jump onto the web page. So that's my IP. Oops, I have to go into the directory where I have the WebRTC client. That is VC. So when remember we configured Vato to run on port 8882. We have wait, what's going on? Okay, so it's giving me that I need to. Okay, I'm going to access with domain name vato.ime.com. VC, since we already configured that, that should take us to the login page. Okay, so you will have a page like this. And then FreeSWITCH basically has default extensions or conference rooms that you can use. They are between 3,500 and so on. So I would just basically use 3,500 and connect to one of the rooms in the servers. So when you connect, it will get you into a room and tell you that you're alone. You can't hear, but I'm hearing music on hold in that room. I'll use my second laptop to connect to also call in to 3,500. All right, it's coming in. As it comes in, all right, 3,500. So that user is right here. So one of the users is my second laptop. That's why you see the cameras are different. So the green shows that it's actually receiving audio. The red shows that it's muted. For those of you who have used the 888 room, this is how Virtual Communicator is by default. You have settings here to change the audio, the base rate, the camera settings, and resolution. All right. The last thing I'm going to demo here before I complete this is I'm going to register a soft phone, a SIP phone, to my endpoint. I'll basically register any 1003 and say add this IP. The password is 12345. Next. Basically do this. 003 IP. All right, so my IP is first one. So I can also call into 3,500 right here, and yeah, so the SIP endpoint has also come into the room, and I can hear my echo sound up. All right, so basically that's how you configure FreeSWITCH to support Vato. And the steps that I've taken, it's so important to know that you have to, after installing FreeSWITCH, you generate the certificates. After generating the certificates, in this case, I've used let's say Encrypt. After generating the certificates, you install a web server, and then after installing web server, you configure FreeSWITCH to log into. You configure the WebRTC client to log into FreeSWITCH, reload FreeSWITCH, and you're good to go. I guess that will be all from my side today. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
All right. Cool, Fred. Hey, question for you on the Let's Encrypt certificates. Those do expire. Like once every, what is it? I think it's 120
Yes.
days. So is there anything special you have to do with FreeSWITCH once you rerun CertBot to update those, or do you just recopy the certificates in and let them go?
Yeah, I mean, once you can have a script that copies in the certificates, it does a renewal. So Let's Encrypt basically has an option for renewal. You just put it in a cron job, and then it runs probably every 2 months. And once that is renewed, FreeSWITCH will just pick it up.
Right, yeah, you'll just have to restart FreeSWITCH so that
Yes.
Word rereads and everything. It's not going to pick them up on the fly.
No, it won't. You have to reload FreeSWITCH. So you can actually append that in your script to reload FreeSWITCH for you every time it renews the certificates.
Cool.
And so what I keep on going back to the certificate thing, but basically what happens is it's going to like silently fail, right? If that certificate's not valid.
I mean, yeah. Well, when you go, if the certificate is not valid and you try to access the domain, since the domain is already resolving, it will give you an error on the browser and tell you this page is not trusted. Well, you have to manually accept it. So every time you'll have that step that says certificate not trusted. I wanted to demo this here with this IP. So yeah, something like this.
Because that's one of the most common errors when it comes to, because people, when they're testing, they always try to use self-signed certificates, right? And you're going to have the same issues.
Yeah, I mean, self-signed certificates have some issues, and we wouldn't really recommend them. So you would go for something really like Let's Encrypt that can be trusted, and you won't really have many issues there.
Cool. Well, I think Michael's having some connectivity issues today, Fred. He's
okay. I don't
nice with him. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in here for Michael while he gets that figured out. But thank you.
Can you show my screen once more, Ken?
Yes, sir. We sure can. Let's see here. Let's get the right button here. There we go.
All right. So this is what I was looking for. What Mike was asking, if you have your certificate expired, when you try something like this, this would ideally be the domain, and it will give you an alert, and then you can go under advanced, and you just click proceed, and it will take you to the page. And then once you've done that, you can still connect to Vato, but you'll be told that it's actually not secure here. And then this is the part where it's asking you to give permissions to your microphone and camera. You allow that, and then you go ahead and register your username and email and log in.
Right. Yeah, and it's important to remind people here at this point that one of the reasons that you really want to use HTTPS is if you're just going over non-secure or even over HTTP, it won't remember that you allowed the camera and microphone. So you have to allow that every time. And in certain browsers, you may have to, one of the things that Verto Communicator does is it scans your camera resolutions to make sure that, that it's supporting the right resolutions. And if you don't, on certain browsers like Firefox, and I think Chrome does it sometimes too, you have to click OK like 8 or 9, like 5 or 6 or 7 times to OK the camera, because it'll ask you every time it tries to access it. So
the idea is generating a certificate. Having a certificate.
Right. Yeah.
To avoid all that.
Yeah, and I like Fred, I highly recommend Let's Encrypt and using CertBot, because it's free, and you just cron it up, and you don't have to worry about it. And
well, not only that, but it's fully trusted, and that's the real value, is to get a free certificate that's trusted. In all
exactly, like Michael just said there, they're fully trusted. So,
and I think recently, I don't know if I'm accurate here, but I think Let's Encrypt also started supporting wildcard domains, wildcard.
Yeah, I did hear that. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's really
brand new this year.
That gives a plus.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's really cool. There's a lot of cool stuff you can do there with that. there's a couple of different ways you can set that up in there. One of the ways that I like to do it with CertBot, Fred, is instead of copying the certificates over to FreeSWITCH, is doing symlinks in the TLS directory or the cert directory over to where CertBot stores them. So you don't have to update, you don't have to copy them over to FreeSWITCH all the time. You can just restart FreeSWITCH, because CertBot actually uses symlinks for a permanent location, and then it just updates the file and re-updates those symlinks. So from FreeSWITCH side, you can symlink to where their symlinks, where they have the symlinks that point to the real files. And it's kind of a chain effect, but you don't have to copy files around or anything once you set up the symlinks. You just run CertBot, let CertBot do its thing, and then restart FreeSWITCH. So maybe that's a topic that we can get you to cut. We can, look at different ways we can do that in the future, Fred. And you can come back and show folks how to get that all set up. That might be
all right. We'll look into that.
Yeah, because I got to tell you that not having a valid certificate, I just got a call last week on that. Like that's something that happens so frequently. And so, and if you really think about it, it's one thing, like it's one thing to start with self-generated certificates, but if you had Let's Encrypt and it expired and then all of a sudden it stops working, that's got to be more frustrating, because the last thing you're going to be thinking about is the certificate.
Yeah,
sure. So like Ken says, maybe this is something we can cover it soon, maybe next year, beginning of next year.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. So you have any other questions?
The other nice thing about Let's Encrypt is it's not a chain certificate, because a lot of times when you go to when you get like the lower cost certificates, they're chain certificates, right? So it's actually it's a trusted issued certificate that's reissuing a chain certificate, right? And so I guess the only difference there is the fact that you just have to do a little bit more configuration. So you know, in the actual key file, you have to have both. But Let's Encrypt it's a full on cert.
Yeah, sure. It really solves a lot of hurdles, and if you have to do self-signed certificates, you're going to have more issues.
Yeah.
Let's Encrypt does that in 1 minute, and you're good to go.
No adding custom root CAs to your browsers and all your customers' browsers and every machine you ever have to touch. It's way better, guys. So I think one of the takeaways from today from Fred and from the rest of the crew is go use Let's Encrypt. It's worth it. It's worth the effort of getting it set up. So go do that. But we are running up against time here today, Michael and Fred. Are there anything else that you want to get in here before we let Fred get back to work? Because I know he's probably got a lot of stuff to do today still. And I know you got a lot of stuff to do, Michael.
Yeah, Fred, thank you for coming in. And also the other thing is there was a lot of good information on those slides. So those slides had a lot of like really neat tricks in there to get things up and running quick, right? And extra like little information kudos. So it's always good to see that stuff. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.
All right. Fred, thank you very much for coming in today. Michael, thank you very much. Mr. Jarris, thank you for coming in today and talking about transcoding. And thank you again, Miss Abby, for the blog and for the news information. There's a lot of good information out there today. So if you want to see these videos in the future, be sure you follow us on Facebook, like us on Twitter, click that subscribe button right below this video there on YouTube. And then once you click the subscribe button on YouTube, be sure you click the little bell icon next to it so you get the alerts when we post these videos in the future. Thanks, guys, for coming out, and we'll see you next year on ClueCon Weekly. Next week, excuse me. Have fun, guys.
You've been watching ClueCon Weekly. Tune in every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Central. Keep up with the latest happenings by subscribing to our YouTube channel, follow us on Facebook and Twitter, or visit us at freeswitch.com.